Welcome to Higher Learning. I am your host, Oz Rashid. This is more than just a podcast. It's a front row seat to how elite leaders build the most iconic of teams. The kind of leaders who spot potential that others overlook, who build cultures people don't want to leave, who set the bar, then raise it. Work and how we work is evolving at a rapid pace like no time in history. Our guests will give you insights on how to stay out in front when it comes to all things talent, leadership, management, artificial intelligence, and developing the skills that actually matter. Whether you're a founder, hiring manager, or just obsessed with building teams the right way, this is your spot. If it's your first time here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button, drop a rating, tell a friend who gets it. To our longtime listeners, we appreciate you. Thanks for the continued support. Now, let's get into it. All right, today's guest is Gordon Cooper, a commercially driven HR executive who has made a career out of transforming organizations from the inside out. With leadership roles at global powerhouses like JPMorgan, Deloitte, Kenneth, and MasterCard, he's built a reputation for turning HR into a strategic, business-first engine that drives real performance. Across his career, Gordon has reshaped talent systems, redesigned operating models, and led transformations that boosted engagement, accelerated growth, and aligned entire organizations around strategy. Whether in high-stakes financial services, global payments, or luxury beauty and retail, his work has had one consistent through line: elevate people, elevate the business. In today's conversation, we get into Gordon's path into HR, whether it was intentional or something that revealed itself along the way, what it was really like navigating radically different worlds, Wall Street, global payments, and luxury retail. We talk about why HR leaders must speak the language of the business, what separates strategic partners from reactive operators, and why integrated talent strategy is non-negotiable for any company that wants to scale. This is a blueprint for modern HR leadership, strategic, commercial, and directly tied to outcomes. Gordon, how the heck are you?
I am doing much better after hearing that intro. That is wow. I don't know who that guy is, but he sounds impressive.
I mean, I'm telling you what, we try to make a big spotlight on our guests, and it's well-deserved, my friend. You're also one of the more stylish and one of the most tasteful from an art perspective, and I can tell this just from looking at your background right now. So I am so excited for this episode.
Oh, I appreciate it. I'm equally as excited.
Awesome. So let's get right into it. We talked about all the great brand names and companies you've worked for. You've worked in different levels of HR throughout these organizations. So having this long, illustrious career in HR, how did you get into HR? Is this something you fell into?
I wish I could tell you that, ever since I was 8, I've always dreamt of being in HR. I think just like most of us in HR, we didn't even know what it was until we found it. For me, I actually started my backgrounds in clinical psych. I got an opportunity while in grad school to do a little bit of consulting. The consulting bug bit me. And from there, went from consulting always in sort of the HR space because my degree was in psychology. I got my first opportunity, and I think Deloitte at the time said, gosh, what do we do with somebody who's got a clinical degree but wants to be in business? I know, change management. And from change management, built it out to talent management, built it out into large-scale org design, and found myself in HR ever since.
Why did the PhD make sense? Why did you feel like that was something you wanted to add to your tool belt?
Well, when I started my career, I was actually doing more clinical work. It was only once I got into grad school and I had a bunch of friends who were in the IO program, Industrial Organizational Psych program, that I actually started to learn about that, explore more about that. I took a couple of classes really just as electives to learn more, and found myself just gravitating more and more towards that. I think oftentimes people see those as like just vastly different. Both really teach you about to go in, you do some type of assessment or evaluation, you look at the results, you put in some type of intervention, and you say, hey, are we making progress? If so, let's keep going. If not, how do we change course? One with an individual, one with an organization.
The best executives I know combine some level of kind of cross-functional expertise or bringing two things together that might have seemed very disparate to come together to give you a different perspective and lead teams in a much different way. And that seems to be no different than yourself. You brought up the fact that I wish I could tell you at 8 years old that this is something that I always wanted. I asked that question of almost every HR leader I talked to. I've never had one person say that they dreamed of being in HR as a kid. Maybe HR is doing a terrible job of marketing itself to the early in career, and by that I mean like elementary school, potential talent out there, so they can start to pursue this. from a very beginning path. I don't know, maybe we hit up the hall monitors at schools or the safety, or like, I don't know, the kids that walk kids to the principal's office. There's got to be a better market for this, because I agree with you. It seems like something people randomly fall into a lot of the time rather than being a pursued path.
Yeah, look, I think it is. I think part of it is marketing. I also think that in a lot of organizations, HR is still viewed as the personnel department. So I think that the more strategic HR becomes part of the norm, the more likely people are to hear about it earlier on in their careers.
I think that this can be some of the best marketing that we put out there, because a couple of guys like you and me that are both in HR, we don't come across as personnel only or compliance or wall monitors, like I mentioned. A lot of swag in this video right now, brother. So we're gonna,
Yes.
some little kid's gonna hear this right now. He's like, I can't wait to be in HR. It's gonna be so great. Let's talk about the brands that you work for. JPMorgan,
Yep.
Kenneth Cole.
Yep.
I mean, I got to be honest. I can't imagine a bigger industry juxtaposition than financial services to high-end luxury good and retail. Were those environments as different as they sound, or was there more in common than maybe I'm missing? And I'm interested what you took away from both JP, right, which we have for a long time.
Yeah. Yes and no. Give you a nice consultancy answer. At its core, look, leadership is leadership. Good leadership is good leadership. You know it when you see it. You can teach it. You can develop it. I think those things are consistent throughout. I think what changes is really sort of their appreciation, how they go to market, how things move through an organization. Obviously, with a company like a JPMorgan, phenomenal company, top talent, every single offering that you make, every single solution that you recommend, got to go through 100 different levels of approval. You need sign off from 8,000 different stakeholders. You will be challenged. You must have the data to support the argument. You must be ready to defend the argument. Hey, if that's going to help me, great, let's go. I don't think it requires the same level of approval, a little bit more of an appreciation. But I think, it's maybe a little bit less rigorous, a little bit less sophisticated in terms of some of their HR processes.
Yeah, it's such a great point. So we started doing work in New York back in like 2014. MSH is the recruiting business, and Morgan Stanley was one of our first clients. And we did really, really well over 2 years. We started in technology, but managed to branch out to the point where we were the only recruiting firm that had ability to serve and fulfill roles across every function in the organization: legal, operations, wealth management, asset management, technology. And you saying that just brings back to my mind how insane that really is, because you know how much data you have to have that shows how good you are at what you're doing, and how many different stakeholders you have to get on board to make that happen. So you're totally right. There's a lot of bureaucracy, right, when it comes to financial service, a lot of rigidity and having to do things because it's a bank and there's a lot on line. But that's a high-end luxury brand where brand matters so much. I'm interested, when you went into the interview, did you feel pressure to like be a little more dressed up and dapper, or like the way you carried yourself? Did you change your approach at all in the interview than you might have if you were interviewing for, say, MasterCard?
Great question, Oz. I wish I could tell you that there was any part of me that could actually try and be cooler. Unfortunately, I'm a what you see is what you get kind of guy. I would like to tell you that I tried a little bit harder, but unfortunately, this is both my maximal and my minimum cool, both at the same time. This is just sort of,
It's authentic you, and that's what they love. So you were doing something right.
yeah. Well, I don't know if I'm doing something right, but I got the job anyway.
You got the job, right? I'm just thinking of, if I came to visit you as a potential customer and I was thinking about what I was going to wear that morning, I would make sure that I had like the right threads. I just want to make sure that I was dressed to a T and dressed to impress. But apparently, just being your authentic self is what matters the most. So another great lesson there.
Well, I think to me, that's always going to be important. There are certainly others who, are maybe a little bit more sensitive to people's appearance. For me, I care what's between the ears, less about what's, between the shoulder blades.
I love that. I love that. We're going to get to that in a second, because I want to learn a little bit about how you view talent and how you identify top talent, high potential talent. One thing I want to talk to you about, though, is, and we talked about this in our pre-call and shared some stories about, a lot of HR professionals can't or won't speak the business language. And I'm interested from your perspective, and you gave me a really good answer when I asked you this earlier. Why do you think this is important? And what would you recommend to somebody who came to you and asked how they could better understand the business of where they work? Because here's the issue I see. You get into HR, you get locked into talent management or being a business partner or being, talent acquisition, and you're very like kind of focused on that. And you're not always thinking about what are the business outcomes of what I'm doing? What are kind of the strategic imperatives of what I'm doing? And you can see people go throughout their whole career being HR professionals more so than business professionals. How do you draw a difference there? And what kind of advice would you give somebody that wants to make that change?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I often refer to myself as a business person who happens to be in HR, not an HR person who happens to work for business. For me, if you're not understanding what business executives are trying to achieve, then you can't put in place a proper talent strategy, HR strategy, right? For me, the talent strategy, the HR strategy always has to support that business strategy. So if the business strategy is about growing revenue, there's a number of different levers that you can pull in the HR space to do that, right? Are you hiring somewhat differently? Are you compensating somewhat differently? What are those levers that you're pulling in the HR space to enable that revenue growth? If you're looking to cut costs as a business, right? Where are those levers? What are those levers that you can pull? What are the org redesigns? What are the skills that you'd be looking for? Who are those people who can take on more, to do more with less? For me, it's really, you have to understand those business goals, those business targets. If you can't speak that language, then you're just an HR person who does HR. It doesn't have any relationship to the business. For me, I always think that, look, there's certainly an academic pursuit that you can do. I know a lot of people go on to grad school, do things like that. I think it's oftentimes just about sitting down with business executives, with finance executives, and understanding the business, right? Asking them questions about, why do we do what we do? How are we different? Who are our main competitors? What makes us different from them? What are our business strategy? Both immediate, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, because those should all be influencing what you're trying to do from an HR perspective. Right? Because if you're not looking to support that strategy, then frankly, you're just a maintenance HR person. And frankly, I find that those people are a dime a dozen. Those aren't differentiated HR folks.
And I really think it comes out in every intentional conversation, every meeting, every presentation, right? Speaking that language, speaking about the broader impact, especially when you're meeting with stakeholders across the business, which many times are the people that you're supporting or your customers at the end of the day, right? How do you talk in the terms that matter, right? How do you talk in a financial perspective? How do you talk about, if we do this, it means X, Y, Z for the business? I just think it's so key. And I don't think it's ingrained. I think it's something that is something that people have to intentionally think about and put to use. Because I don't think a lot of times that people have been grown up in their career and always thought of it as a very natural thing. So I think that's really good advice.
I'll tell you a quick story. I was working on a compensation structure relatively recently, and I was pitching a different way of paying store managers. And the brand president said like, oh, no, that's not the way we do things. And I'm like, but if this is your goal, this is clearly a better strategy. And look, we ended up compromising. We did a quick pilot. Overall, significant increase in the doors where we piloted it, right? So you are able to say, look, your business strategy is this. This is our best way of getting at that strategy. It's putting the recommendation in context that's going to support their goals.
Finding the right talent for your team doesn't have to be a struggle. Meet Aon Hire, the world's first hiring experience management platform designed to transform the way you hire. Powered by AI, Aon Hire takes the hassle out of every step in the process. From smart resume analysis to customized interview questions, it saves you time, money, and effort. Plus, with real-time insights from every interview, you can quickly identify top candidates, reduce turnover, and stay on budget. And forget about note-taking, Aon Hire takes care of that for you. Ready to revolutionize your hiring process? Visit aonhire.com and get started today.
I love that story. And what's really like, total rewards is one of the most key areas where being an HR person, you have to be a business person. Charlie Munger famously said, right, show me your incentive structure and I'll show you your results. And so I love that you went to the brand leader and we're talking about at the store management level. Well, if this is our business objective, this is what we need to do to achieve it. And I guess that gets people to go back to first principles thinking and really rethink things. So I think that story is really, really good. And it's a nice segue into my next question. For context, for people that don't know HR that well, you'll have these big corporate organizations and they'll have talent management and talent acquisition and compensation and benefits, and then like, the employee relations or like HRBP. And there'll be all of these like what I would call verticals within HR that sometimes, depending on how good of a team it is, like the leaders either have like, misaligned incentives and agendas or don't like each other, do like each other. But most of the time, they're working in absence of each other, which to me, and I know to you, just seems goofy. So you said in large organizations, most of the HR talent strategy isn't integrated as a best practice. I'd like to know where in your career you've seen that really work and why that's such an issue when that's not happening.
Yeah, look, I think that, HR evolved in some ways too slow and in some ways too fast. I think that a lot of people went really deep really quickly, and I'm a talent acquisition person, and they may be phenomenally talented in the talent acquisition space, or I'm a succession planning person or performance management person or whatever it may be. Unfortunately, the lack of people who are sort of playing across those verticals, those functions, those COEs, whatever we want to call them, I think are fewer and further between. So for me, it's not about, are you great at talent acquisition? It's about, do you understand where you're sourcing talent from? Meaning, what is it we're sourcing for? What are the things that are the differentiating competencies for that? If we've got a succession plan, are you using that succession plan to drive your talent acquisition? If you're doing learning and development, or are you working with the person who's doing succession planning to say, hey, what's going on in the organization? If you look at sort of the next level of leaders, what are the skill sets that they collectively need? Are you looking at the performance management results to say, hey, what are those areas that are needing development? What are the themes that we're seeing across each of the functions? Are you then working with talent acquisition to say, hey, here are the skills that we don't have in the organization. It would be great to hire for those. Unfortunately, we've set up so many of our HR organizations to have these siloed COEs or these siloed verticals, to use your language, that they're just not talking to each other. They're not encouraged to, they're not discouraged, but I just don't think it happens naturally. What I think good leaders do is they're able to look across and say, hey, how are we using the data or the information from one of these verticals to drive each of the other verticals?
Oh, brilliantly articulated. And like, that's the responsibility of the chief human resources officer or the head of HR at the end of the day, right? It's one thing to be able to acquire the Avengers, right? And get all the best in class people in all these different spaces. But real leaders make them work together. Real leaders find ways to drive synergy and integration. And I thought the way that you said that about how it starts with sourcing and learning and development and succession planning and how all these things have to be tied together, it's just really key in a great organization. And you're right.
I agree with you. I would actually take it to the next level down is if you own one of these verticals, you should understand your points of integration, right? So if you're a learning and development person and you haven't looked at the overall performance reviews for each of the organizations that you support, if you haven't looked at the succession plans for each of those organizations, I would argue you're not doing your job to the best of your ability. So yes, CHRO, critical to be pulling those pieces together. At the same time, if you're a person who's sitting in each of those COEs, I would argue it's incumbent on you to understand what those points of integration are and how you get access to that information.
I love that. Call to arms to all our HR leaders out there. This is so impactful. Such good information. Hope people are listening and take advantage of it because I totally agree with you. As somebody that works with a lot of HR organizations, I see this every day. And I think you're right. I think the difference between the great companies and the good companies are the ones that can integrate what they're doing in a way that drives the business forward. All right, let's talk hiring right now. That's how we pay the bills here at the Old Hire Learning. I want to find out from you. You've built great teams. You've built great organizations. Let's start here. What is a core hiring philosophy of yours, either for your own team or for maybe, your larger organization that you're advising?
Yeah, for me, there's a few things that I frequently look for in all of my hires. It does not matter what the role is. Number one, learning mindset. Somebody who says, I don't know the answer to that question, but I want to be able to figure it out. Number two, grit, resilience, whatever you want to call it. Somebody who's fought a battle. I actually prefer people who have lost because frankly, everybody has lost. It's just those people who can say, yeah, I didn't win that battle. I think are the people who I tend to hire for. And, third for me, it's somewhat related to, I think, grit and determination. But it's really the ability to sort of like persevere. It's the ability to fight another fight. It's the ability to combine both that learning mindset and that resilience to say, hey, great, I got my butt kicked. What am I going to do differently? What am I going to do next? What's sort of next for me? That hunger, I think, is something that I'm always looking for. I don't want somebody who says, hey, I'm content where I am. I'm good where I am. I want people who want more. I want to hire people who want my job. Right? Those are the people who are going to give you the X.
Love that. Relentless. It's a relentless mindset, just constantly, the thing that I look for, and I love the way you put that. I think a growth mindset is so important. The things that I try to look at for my team, whether I'm hiring for it or not, is I want to have a consistent intensity, right? The right level of intensity. I want to have high standards, and I want to have like a can-do attitude. And I think a lot of those things that you talked about are really tied into that in terms of grit, determination, and being relentless. So I think that's spot on. Okay, let's talk about memorable interviews now. Okay, because I imagine you had to have been involved in a few of them. Whether you were interviewing or you were interviewing somebody, can you tell us about a memorable interview that comes to mind when I ask you that?
Yeah, I've actually had plenty of good and plenty of bad. I'll start with the better one because it's pretty memorable for me. I once hired a person who somehow during the interview, we actually end up talking about Air Jordans and, just literally started talking about sneakers. I don't even remember how we got on that. And we couldn't remember what year it was. Oh, nice. Excellent. Love it.
I just pulled my hamstring doing that, so I hope it was worth it.
For me, it was definitely worth it. But we started talking about Jordans and we couldn't remember when they were first introduced. Coming out of that interview, I literally got like the next day, I think it was, a 5-page slide, a 5-page PowerPoint deck on the origin of Jordans, what the different models were, and it was literally like, it showed me he understood what we were talking about. He understood the assignment. He went over and above for something that was completely meaningless, but understood it was something that we connected on, and it was something that he was going to go above and beyond and prove, hey, I want this job.
Wow.
So for me, it's something that always sort of stuck with me and it's something that I ask myself, what's the Jordan moment? Right? It's just sort of something that stuck.
There's a double entendre there too, because a Jordan moment is like a winning moment too, in addition to being about the Air Jordan.
Yeah.
Now, it could have helped you guys if I was in the interview. 1984, the Jordan 1, it was banned initially, which led to its big success, right? And those are some of the most famous Jordans that exist out there. It became, they thought it was going to be a $3 or $4 million business. It ended up being $120 million after it got banned. So
yeah,
the Air Jordan.
Where were you when I needed you?
I mean, listen, I think I would have gotten a job. I don't know if I would have put a PowerPoint together though. That's the problem. So this person seemed to excel. All right, give me the bad one though. We like the salacious ones on here.
Yeah, I got 2. I once had somebody come into my office and quite literally put their feet up on my desk. Put their feet on my desk.
Like, do you remember? Have you seen Good Will Hunting? When
yeah, it was that type of moment. It was that type of moment. But I was literally like.
And the interview right away? Like, how'd you handle it?
I said, get your feet off my desk. What? It's just blatantly disrespectful. I'm sorry. No.
Yeah, I don't know. No, that guy must have been on something. I can't imagine that being a good idea.
He was already connected in the organization. He knew the head of this and the head of that. So for him, he already had the job. I was just like a check mark, like a tick box. Yeah. He realized that I wasn't just a tick mark.
Yeah, I don't like that at all. What else?
Another one, I had a young woman come in and she was interviewing for a job. At the time, I was with a large bank and she was trying to sell me on her internship that she had. And it was a phenomenal internship. She had the skills, and she kept going on and on about how if I knew anything about the area, I would know that they're best in class and they're the best company to work for and they're the best this, best that. And I looked at her and I said, if they're the best, why aren't you going to work there? And there was this moment of like, and for me, it was just a nice example of she lost the forest for the trees, right? She was so intent on selling me at how good her internship experience was that she forgot that she was applying for a job with a different company. Right. And I gave her that feedback live. And frankly, for me, I actually love moments like that because for me, the interview wasn't over, right? It was, hey, let's see how she does. I gave her the feedback and she became very reactive, didn't like the fact that she was given feedback, went so far as to complain to my manager at the time. And I said, look, that's just not who I'm looking to hire. Let me go back to one more positive, if I may. It's sort of the opposite side of that coin. Somebody that I was interviewing, their background was actually in clinical psych. They obviously didn't look me up on LinkedIn to see my background. And she's telling me all about this depression screen that she had to do. And she was trying to tell me about this screen and this, that, the other. And, oh, and if I knew, and I would know that. And I said to her, I said, actually, my background's in clinical psych and I'm more than familiar with the assessment. It's got these scales on it. And literally you could see that she went like the obvious recoil, and she very calmly collected herself and sort of just kept going, rolled with it. And I said, look, I was in consulting at the time. If she can handle the interview with me and get confronted with that and realize that she had put her foot in her mouth and keep going, that's exactly the skill that I'm looking for when it comes to somebody who I've got to put in front of a client.
I think you're spot on about that. Being able to handle that moment of adversity in the interview, thinking, because probably 99% of the room she's in, that is the case, that she does have to explain it, and not in this room, but she handled it well. I'm thinking back, the perfect interview would have been the guy coming in, putting his feet up on the desk. He's wearing a pair of Jordans, says, I interned at Nike. I'm going to send you a 5-point PowerPoint on this. And then who knows where we go from there? There's some bad, there's some good. We're not sure. That was phenomenal. I ask everybody interview stories. You had 4 killer ones there. I think what I took away from that, if I'm a candidate, is humility is key. Don't go in there assuming anything. You know what that leads to. Also, over deliver and go above and beyond. The best interview, and this person didn't actually work out, but one of the best interviews I ever had was somebody that really high IQ, really high EQ, to the point where they wrote handwritten letters to 7 different people that interviewed them and wrote, we compared all of them together, wrote like unique, customized notes on specific things that were talked about in every interview and addressed, and sent them all and mailed them all to, and we all looked at it and were like, this is amazing. So that didn't end up working out for whatever reason. I got to still figure out what happened there. I think we talked about this in a previous spot about AQ, application quotient. And I don't know if that person had it, but that was a phenomenal, pulling something out from that individual interview and remembering that is a big, big way to stand out. For people in a crowded market right now, please pay heed to that. What about your favorite question? Do you have a favorite question that you like to ask in interviews?
For me, I don't really have a favorite question. For me, I do like to try and get into the failure. So for me, it's not about, tell me about your greatest strengths, tell me about your developmental opportunities. The thing that I like to get to is tell me about the time you failed, right? Not what do you need to work on? That's too philosophical. It's too theoretical. No. Tell me about the time you failed. Tell me about the time you didn't do exactly what you needed to do. Right. And for me, I'm listening for, here's what went sideways. I understand I've dissected the problem, not just I failed and I moved past it, but I took the time to think about what I could have done differently, what I'm going to do next time, how am I going to learn, how am I going to grow? It's sort of that resilience and growth mindset and hunger mentality, right? It's something that I like to try and unearth during interviews.
I really like that. It's good to and see how vulnerable people will be and what they're willing to share. Because usually you're trying to paint this perfect picture, and when you get confronted with a question like that, it becomes a lot harder to do that. And you can kind of tell when people are, oh, I'm a perfectionist, right? That's my biggest weakness. It's like you've got to really dig in and find a time. But to your point, the best of us have all failed multiple times. As you asked the question, I was thinking in my head, I can think of 10 things since 2020 that I would say are things that I should have done better as a CEO. But how you respond, how you handle that adversity, that's what's really key, ultimately, to know if somebody's going to be a good fit or not. When you're like, let's say you're deeper in the process with somebody and like, that they're a pretty good fit. How do you help them understand what it's like to work with you? How do you get them to have a realistic job preview of what to expect in terms of our team and the role and myself? What do you do? Is it as simple as just articulating it? Do you try to paint around it? Do you walk them through it? Like, what do you do?
One of my favorite things to do is I am more than glad to give you the phone number, email address of everybody on my team, because I do want people to know what it's like to work for me. I don't want somebody to join. Anybody can tell, oh, I'm a great leader and I'm a great manager and I empower my team and I develop my team. Everybody can say that, right? The people who actually do it have nothing to hide. I'm not a perfect leader. I don't think anybody who's ever worked for me would say that I'm a perfect leader. But I'm more than glad to put you in touch with anybody who's ever worked for me and hear what they have to say. I have high expectations. I set the bar high, but it is never unrealistic. If I don't think that somebody can get to this point, I'm not going to expect that kind of workout. It's unrealistic for me. It's just going to lead to failure, right? Every team has B players. So you should expect B level work, but understand that that's going to affect their comp, their promotions, all of that good stuff. For me, I don't want to sell you on what kind of leader I am. I want you to learn what kind of leader I am. Go talk to the people who work for me.
I really, really like that. I've never heard of that before. I love that. I might steal that and do that myself and hand out my team's phone numbers with their permission, of course, and make sure that people can ask and find out what it's like to work with me and work in our organization. I'm very proud of that. And to your point, it doesn't mean it's all puppy dogs and lollipops.
It's not.
But you're gonna see what you get, and I love that.
I never want somebody to be surprised. Oh, I didn't know you had high expectations.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want somebody finding that out 2 weeks in. You want them to know before they take the job. That's better for everybody. Last question for me: when you miss on somebody, because we all miss, is there a theme that you look back on, or maybe something that you had to learn throughout the course of your career and kind of adjust?
I've never missed.
Never missed. Everybody's been a perfect hire. That's amazing.
I'm just kidding.
Trick detector.
Look, I think that in my career, when I've missed, it's been, one of the things that you and I had talked about previously is sort of like the pedigree versus the potential, if you will. For me, when I have failed, it's sort of falling for that pedigree a little bit, the great education, the great experience, and the great companies and the great whatever. It happened more, I think, earlier in my career where I was maybe a little bit more of a sucker for that stuff. And a lot of those kids may not have fought through, may not have the level of resilience than somebody who went to, who worked their way through college, or somebody who, had to fight their way to get to where they are. So that has been, I think, the theme. Luckily, it hasn't happened recently because I think I'm a little bit wiser, hopefully, with regards to my hiring practices. But yeah, earlier in my career, I think I was a little bit more enamored with, the Ivy League, great internship, great whatever. And if those people haven't failed, or they haven't, struggled, or they haven't, whatever it may be, they may not do so hot in corporate America when failure is inevitable.
And you know what hits the fan. And listen, I hope you'd have learned, because you said learning mindset's really important for people you hire. So you want to exhibit those same personality traits yourself. I really love that. I want to learn a little more day in the life. We're contractually obligated to talk about AI every podcast in 2025.
Yep.
I don't know if they re-up the terms for 2026. Are you using AI in any type of unique way, or what's AI been maybe in your personal life or in professional life? What has it been?
Yeah, I obviously use it every day. I have about 1 million thoughts on it. My high level thoughts on it is incredibly useful as an individual productivity tool. I don't think systemic AI in HR is here yet. I think once the Workdays, the success factors those tools start to come more into play, I think that's when it's going to be better. Oz, let's say I'm working for you. Sorry, Oz, my best friend's son is named Oz. Oz, let's say I'm working for you and I ping you online and I say, hey, Oz, can I take Friday off? Why is it that AI can't read that, understand, put in a vacation day for me, or even at least send me a link? Hey, here's where you should submit for a vacation day. None of that is automated. And I think that is the stuff that will be automated in the future. As of right now, it's a next level tool. Most recently, I was doing some independent consulting. And the founder, who passed away 20 plus years ago, of the company I was working for, I actually created an avatar of him and had him read the value proposition of the company. So it was pretty surreal, pretty next level, pretty cool what you can do around marketing and branding and employee value proposition. It was pretty slick, I gotta say.
You got to send me the link on that. I might not have to stand in any more trainings anymore. I could just send out AI avatar Oz out there to talk even better than I could.
Right. Look, I think that management training, fast forward 10 years, I think it's going to be an entirely different ballgame where you're going to sit down and you're going to rehearse, giving somebody feedback, and AI is going to tell you like, hey, that's not great. You should send this way. You should have done that. You should have reframed it. I think that's the future of AI and of training, is it's not going to be one person in front of a class of 30 talking about how to hire, how to train, how to manage, how to whatever it may be.
I agree. Gradually and then suddenly is
Yeah,
how we'll all feel about AI, right?
absolutely.
What's a great book you read recently that you'd recommend, or even a favorite book long term?
Look, for me, I have read countless books. I don't think about them in terms of the overall book. I take away sort of the nuggets from each of the book. And most recently, I've actually been reading quite a bit on AI. Obviously, not books, but sort of articles, and what I think that they're going to do, and what I think is going to happen to sort of the workforce overall. So that's what I've been reading a lot on.
So what's your take? Well, give us the 30-second take on the workforce. What's going to happen?
I think we're in a lot of trouble because I think a lot of the more junior level jobs are the ones that are being automated. And what's going to happen when those junior level folks don't exist? What then happens when we need to promote them into the manager or director levels when those folks are now AI? And I think that there's going to be a really interesting moment in the workforce where we say, okay, who are we going to promote? And those folks may not exist anymore.
Totally agree with you. It's like you've been reading my LinkedIn. I think it's a humongous problem. I think businesses have an imperative and not just think about, oh, well, we don't need to pay for this anymore. That was never the point. You could have always brought in people to be able to do it better than somebody early in career. The point is building a bench. The point is developing future leaders in your organization. The point is having a succession plan in place. The point is doing something for the community and society that's really important in terms of getting kids to work out of school after they sign this social compact of hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to college and not worrying about intern salaries or things like that. I do not understand how businesses can be that short-sighted. And I agree with you. I think that you're right. It'll happen. I think there'll be a backlash. And then I think I think there'll be changes to the university system because of it. But I ultimately think that bringing young talent into the pipeline is going to be very, very important because I don't think human jobs are going away for the next 15 to 20 years at the least. And I always think that there might be some premium put on keeping things humane, right? And rather than being technology.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Only.
I also think that for folks who are coming out of college now, it's imperative that every single one of them know how to use AI, the whole
100%.
school of thought around prompt engineering. You should know all of the tools that are out there, what they do differently, what one does better than any other. I think those are the folks who are going to be most employable in the near term.
100%. And I also think about your chosen discipline. Think about what the capability of AI is now and what it might be in 5 years and how that's going to impact it and stay out in front. One thing I think, I said, I think there's going to be jobs that are going to be displaced in the short term. I do. I do believe in long-term abundance. I don't believe that it's going to be universal basic income and us all playing, the harmonica all the time. I really don't. I think work is innate to us. I think team is innate to us. I think challenging and building something is innate to us. I don't find that that's going to change just because the technology might allow for that. In fact, if anything, I think it'll pay more. But I'll tell you one thing that I know is going to grow in terms of industry: compliance and regulation and safety of AI, right? And I've said this before, but much like we have policemen and firemen and doctors and things like that, if AI is going to become ubiquitous and part of the infrastructure of everything, we're going to have way more controls around it. And there's going to be entire industries and cottage industries developed around this space because it's going to become one of the most important things that we do if we really want to get the full power of the technology. We have to minimize the downside, maximize the upside. That means a proliferation of people in that space, in my opinion, might be a big one. Okay, we're getting real heady here. We're getting deeper AI than I thought on this
One more
conversation.
point. The question then becomes, does that sit in HR or in IT or in compliance or in audit but we can get into that conversation some other time.
That's a great one. That is a really great one. If not, you and I will both be playing harmonicas at some point. So we'll just
Hey,
have to figure that out.
I'll work on my skills.
Well, at least we'll be together.
I'm going to get an AI
last
to learn
question.
how to do that.
That's last question from you, okay?
Yeah.
If you could give 20-year-old Gordon advice that you didn't know then, but that you know now, what would it be?
Oh my God, this is so easy for me. You don't always have to be right. I remember coming out of grad school, I thought, man, they're hiring me to know all the answers. I've got to know everything there is to know. And boy, I thought that, if I didn't know an answer, for shame. And what I've realized throughout my career is it's way more important to know the right question to ask than it is to know the correct answer. Or even if you don't know the answer, to say, hey, I don't know. Let me figure it out. I'll get right back to you. And then to do that. For me, that was a huge learning moment. and one that I wish I had known earlier.
You don't always have to be right. Can I tell you, can I build on that?
Please.
Especially in marriage. For all of you listening out there, it's not always about being right. I promise you, it's not always about being right. Just trust me on that one. Great advice, brother. It looks like you learned a lesson because you got that growth mindset. I want to talk Jordan 1s, AI and everything over a bourbon sometime soon, either in South Florida. We can go up to New York and meet up. Gordon, I really appreciate you coming on. Thanks for joining the episode.
Thanks for having me, old friend.